Hi everyone, welcome to my SAS Global Forum 2020 talk. My name is Chris Barefoot. I'm a development manager here at SAS working with conversational technologies. And my talk today is entitled Giving Your Model a Voice, Natural Language Studio, and SAS Visual Data Mining and Machine Learning. Before I get too much further in the talk, I do have to make one correction. Between the time when I submitted this idea as a session to the time when it's actually getting recorded now, the name of one of the main products we're going to show has changed. And so if you remember talking to me at the booth last year or seeing any of the demos we've given, you might have heard the name Natural Language Studio, and that has since changed to SAS Conversation Designer. And Conversation Designer is a product that we're very pleased to be releasing this year in our next release, so be on the lookout for that. So let's talk a little bit about what I hope to accomplish today and what I hope you can take away from this talk. So I hope you'll know that at the end of this that machine learning based models, when placed inside of a chatbot, really extend the reach of the data that you've got, the valuable sort of models that you've built, decisions that people can make based on those models. I really want you to think about chatbots as sort of another user interface into that data. Just like an actual graphical user interface allows certain uses of data, text-based interfaces have their own unique benefits and reasons that you might want to expose your models there. We'll take a pretty extensive look at how a chatbot is made, especially using SAS Conversation Designer. And then lastly, we'll look at, given the VIA platform, so you're creating this bot, you've got your models, how do you link the two, and even link things that are outside of maybe the SAS ecosystem using the VIA platform. So let's talk about the scenario that we'll use here. So for this, we're using the scenario of a bank. So a bank might have an existing chatbot. Maybe that chatbot does things like returns the amount in a user's checking account. Maybe it allows users to transfer money from one account to another. But maybe the bank is now looking to really expand sort of the number of people that are qualifying for loans, and also remove the barrier to entry that you have to go to a website or maybe even walk into a branch to get pre-approved for a loan. So let's say the bank wants to add loan pre-approval to their chatbot. The first thing they're going to do is think about what are the existing assets we have to sort of enable this. And so firstly, they're going to have a ton of data around existing and historical loans, right? So they're going to have all sorts of information about the people who took on those loans. And then they're going to have information about whether that loan was successful or not, whether the user completed it, the client completed it with all payments, or whether maybe they defaulted or struggled with the payments at any point. And so you can imagine rows and rows of data that include things like the client's income and existing debt and whether they defaulted on that loan. And so then using those rows of data, you could pretty easily make some machine learning based models that then take that data and would score new rows, basically new clients, given their data and whether they might default on the loan and what the risk factor there is for that. So with that, let's take a quick look at the chatbot that I've built for this, and then we'll look into how it's made. Just a precursor to me showing this to you, this bot was specifically made for this demo sort of as a toy. So I didn't want to clutter up both the bot and the UI behind it with a bunch of things. So you'll notice it's pretty limited, but that's on purpose. And so a production level bot would obviously have a lot more of everything go into it to make sure it's robust for users. But for this purpose, let's keep it simple. So the bot first greets me and basically asks, am I interested in getting approved for an equity line of credit? We'll go ahead and say yes. I've got buttons here and a couple of these questions, and buttons are nice when you want to guide users' input. Certainly at any point I could enter natural language text here as a response. But buttons are a nice way to kind of keep people on some guardrails if you know you want specific answers to a question. The nice thing is, though, you can still keep it fairly casual and natural language based. So even though I clicked the yes button, the bot pre-responded, am I eligible for a loan, which is kind of a nice back and forth. But here I could just type yes as well if that's what users prefer. So the first question the bot's asking, do you own, mortgage, or rent your current residence? So we'll just say we have a mortgage on it. What's the size of the loan we're looking for? So let's say we're trying to put in a fence in our backyard, so we need $6,500. What's the combined income for your household? And you'll notice here some italic text, so each of these responses can be rich, and we'll look at that in a little bit, how that's accomplished. But let's say the combined income of our house is $85,000. And, we'll also look at basically the ways the bot responds to kind of keep things light and conversational. But now it's asking how much debt do you have, excluding any current mortgage. So let's say we're still paying off a car, maybe have a little bit of credit card debt. So we're going to say $14,250. How many years have you been with your current employer? Been here 8 years. Final question, which of these categories best describes the purpose of your loan? So I'm going to say home, considering we're doing an addition into the backyard. So let's review your answers. So now it's basically just regurgitating the answers that I've given it, just to make sure these look right. If they didn't, you could say no, and the bot could then repeat and ask for the same data or ask for which pieces need correcting. But in this case, we'll say, yes, this looks right. So it says, congratulations, the probability of default is 11.4%. We'll look in a second at how it arrived at that answer. And it says that we're pre-qualified for a loan of $6,500. Got a little bit of a mistake there that would be easy to correct, and I can show you where we could do that in just a little bit. And you can visit this link to start your application. Great. So let's go back to our presentation. So the first thing I want to talk about is, and briefly, mostly because I'm not an expert in this area at all, I have to give huge credit to a colleague of mine, Andy Christian, for actually creating this model pipeline using Model Studio. So this takes in the data that we were talking about earlier, and then forms a couple pipelines using some different machine learning based algorithms, and then at the end brings them all back in with a model comparison. And so this is the pipeline that we just executed as part of that chatbot. We scored a new row, which we'll look at in a little bit how that gets accomplished. And then that score returned us a confidence value that we then provided to the user. And it should be mentioned that, a lot of the nuances into creating a chatbot are up to the chatbot designer. A bot designer might decide they don't want to provide a user with a raw 11.4% chance of default, but there are ways to hide that away and still craft nice responses to a user. So all of that's sort of in the art of actually creating a good chatbot. So let's talk about building the bot, and we're going to talk about three main pieces, and then I'll show you the user interface, conversation designer, and where those three pieces get built. The first is natural language understanding. So natural language understanding is that the bot is going to take in natural text from users. That text comes in a variety of ways because users speak and type in a variety of ways. And so natural language understanding seeks to categorize everything users are saying into a known set of intents, which we'll look at in just a little bit. So once you've understood what the user is going to say, it's time to talk about conversational flows. So this is the chatbot needs to retrieve data, maybe needs to ask more questions. So there's all sorts of ways that a chat flow, you could think about it just as a flow that you and I might be having in real life, that the bot might need to flow and answer back to the user. And so lastly, the piece we'll look at is natural language generation. So this is a bot needs to respond to a user, and they need to do so in a way that's natural, that feels like you're actually talking to something. We don't want to fool people into thinking we're human, but it's nice to have it be sort of conversational rather than robotic. And lastly, you need to be able to take the data that we're retrieving as part of the bot and formulate that into a way that the user could read and consume as well. So let's take a look at that interface. Jump to a different tab here. So here's SAS Conversation Designer. Normally I'd have a list of other bots here, but right now I've filtered it to just this specific bot that I want to be using. This is my SGF 2020 bot. We're going to start, there's several tabs up here for different purposes within the bot. We won't look at all of them today, and we'll start actually in the middle here in the intents tab. So intents, entities, and utterances, all three deal with natural language understanding. The intents, as I mentioned before, are the broad categories of things we want the bot to be able to understand. So again, this bot's relatively simple, and we'll really just look at qualifying for a loan here in the interest of time. So inside this intent, which we've labeled qualifying for a loan, there are about 6 utterances here. And these utterances can be viewed as sort of the training data for this intent. So we're providing the bot with, here are all the ways we expect people to ask about qualifying for a loan. And it's important to know that there's some machine learning going on behind this as well. So we're not asking you to provide every different permutation here, but you do need to get good variety here to be able to capture sort of a wide breadth of things people might say. So within these utterances, you'll see a couple words highlighted here in different colors. Those words are actually entities. So entities represent a single word or a group of words that you want to call out as something special within the utterance, for lack of a better word. And it could be special in a variety of ways. One, it could be an important term in the sentence that you know you want to be there. You want to call it out to the natural language understanding engine. It could be that you want to provide variety. So it could be that loan also is sometimes referred to as credit or line of credit. So it could be possible that you want to basically you want to be able to provide variety, and without having to specify, can I get a loan? Can I get a credit? Can I get a line of credit? You don't need to tell us all those. All you need to do is specify that loan is an entity and that it has a variety of ways that it could be said. And lastly, we're not going to see it in this spot, but entities allow you to pass data onto the actual chat flow if you require that in your conversation. So it could be, you could have an utterance, can I get a loan for $10,000? That $10,000 could be provided to the conversational flow, so that then that's one less a piece of information you'd need to query for. But for this bot, let's keep it simple for now. So let's then look at the conversational flow aspects, and for that we'll go to the dialogues. I'll zoom in on this in a second, and this might look intimidating just because of how big it is, but really this is a fairly linear flow. These could obviously take any sorts of twists and turns on top of this, but this is a fairly linear flow that's then collecting the information that we saw earlier. And I want to call out something for a second here. You'll see that the first piece of this flow is actually asking the homeowner if they own, mortgage, or rent their current residence. And you might say, well, that's not really where the bot started. I mean, it started somewhere else with asking me if I was interested in a loan and if I was ready to start the process. So let's actually go look at one of those real quick. Actually, I'm going to go to this loan start. So what I want to call out here, and then we'll jump back to the qualification where I want to spend most of our time, is that Conversation Designer has the ability to link these dialogues together using a node that allows you to jump from one conversation to the other. And what's nice about this is it allows you to manage pieces without having duplication all over your bot. So let's say there's 8 different places within a chat bot that people might ultimately need to get qualified for a loan. Well, rather than having that logic sprinkled all over the place and have to remember to go and update it in several places, you can just have one central dialogue about loan qualification, and then you could jump to that dialogue whenever it makes sense within a conversational flow. So let's jump back to this rather lengthy dialogue. We'll zoom in here a little bit so you can actually get an idea of what's going on. So the bot, as we saw, asks the user, do they own, mortgage, or rent their current residence? What you'll notice here is that this is an HTML response, and that means that if we want line breaks, we have to insert those line breaks ourselves. But what it also means is if we want rich responses, and we'll look at, I believe, this one has an italicized, slightly smaller font here at the bottom. So it allows us to kind of tailor our response and make it a little bit easier for users to sort of see different pieces and us to style it essentially the way we want it to be styled. Sorry. The other thing I want you to notice in that node, if I scroll down just a little bit more, is that we're calling out to something called number tool here. And what we're calling is loan amount as well. So we're saying we want to format this variable, loan amount, using this format. And this is where later on you'll see that there was a mistake in part of the bot, assuming that it was always a 5-digit number. But what's important here is to note that this templating language here, which is Apache Velocity, allows you to format numbers. It allows you to have logic, if-else statements, and loops. So all sorts of things that help you take the data that you've been collecting as part of this bot and spit it back out to the user in a meaningful way. And to that point, we'll look at this blue node here. So after we've asked the user what kind of residence they currently have, and we've provided them with some buttons where they can select, rent, mortgage, or own, we're now going to collect that information in a text input node. And that text input node is going to assign it a variable name of home in the context. So now, in any other part of a bot flow, we can refer to home, and it should give us the value of what that user provided. So without going through all these, it's suffice to say it continues to collect this information, right? Just as we saw in the flow. It asks about your employment, about the purpose of the loan, and then finally, it basically responds to the user saying, here's a review of your answers, and we'll see just a bunch of template, and here, let me show the full text here. We'll see a bunch of formatting of the numbers. We bolded in HTML these values to call it out easier to user, and then at the end ask, do these look right? So the user can then respond with either yes or no. We'll match that they said either yes or no, so in this case we'll look at the yes call. And really, now we're getting to the heart of, after we've collected all this information, what can we do with it? So in this case, what I really wanted to call out was that we can make a web service call. So if you've got some web service sitting out there using REST, so you can get it, post it, put it, you can instrument that using your chatbot. So in this case, we're calling this URL, which happens to be another VIA instance sitting on a machine. We are posting some data to it. We've got some JSON here, which again is templatized. So for instance, I'm using the value home that we just saw earlier in this JSON template. And I've got a couple headers here. So we are authorized, and we're saying that we want JSON back out of this service. And then lastly, I'm going to take the results of whatever this service says, and I'm just going to put it in a variable called score out. And now let's look at the response just after this. And this is where the natural language generation gets a tiny bit more complex, but I hope it's still relatively easy to see what's going on. So after making that call, we've got a variable score out here. Using our template-based language, we're now going to parse that as JSON, because it came back as JSON output. We're going to get one of the pieces of that JSON called outputs, and we're just going to get the first element, not the 0th, but the sort of the second element in the JSON essentially, and get that value. And we're just going to assign that to a local variable called percentage. So this line just essentially means we don't have to keep copy and pasting this entire getter everywhere. So now this percentage is basically the confidence value that the machine learning based model returned on whether that user will default or not. And so now if that percentage was above 50%, we're going to say, sorry, but the percentage of you defaulting returned was pretty high. We're not going to be able to extend that line of credit for you today. But in the case we saw, when that percentage is less than 50%, we have a nice congratulatory message. And so that sort of shows you how the data can affect your output in natural language generation using these templates. And in this case, I'm not sure if this would ever happen unless maybe, yeah. So the author of this bot chose to have basically some debug messages here if something else would happen. So we're going to click OK on that. And then lastly, they respond with the link. So you saw in our case when it was successful, the link to go apply for the loan. But even in the case, this is sort of another bot designer decision, even in the case where it was above 50%, they're still going to send them into a link. Maybe that machine learning based model has some edge cases that disqualified this person, but once they talk to a real person, they could go into the system and override those, so that could be useful as well. The one thing I want to call out here too, and we'll talk about in just a second, if I look at the types of nodes that could be added at any point in a conversation, there are a couple others that allow you to sort of retrieve data. So this one happens to be calling out to a web service, but there are others that allow you to run code essentially while you're executing a bot. So we allow you to write SAS code in the middle of a bot, so if you wanted to execute that. We also have a couple WYSIWYG visual analytics nodes here that allow you to call out to some reports you might have, or even create reports on the fly given data that you've already got loaded into VA. And in the future, we plan to have a couple others here as well. So let me jump back over to my PowerPoint presentation here. So like we just talked about, bot connectivity, and this is sort of the last piece that I want to call out, the power sort of the VIA platform here. So using one node where we made a very simple REST call to essentially the VDMML pipeline there to score a new result, we were able to very easily drop in the power of that machine learning model right into our bot. And so if you've got your information already in SAS, in VIA, it's extremely easy to include that in a bot to add value to your chatbot. There are, of course, other ways. So the power of that web service node is that if you've got code running in some other web service outside of SAS, as long as you can get to it from the chatbot machine that's being hosted on, that is also enabled to provide value for your bot. And coming soon, after this release, we also allow users to write DS2 code, data step 2, or Python code, because we know those two are also very popular among the data science community. So in conclusion, I hope this gave you a really good overview of chatbots, of how you can use machine learning based models inside those chatbots, and how the VIA platform and Conversation Designer allows you to seamlessly integrate those pieces for your users. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time.